Hi guys, welcome to Call to Mind. Today we are going to discuss a little bit about triponemes. गेट 2019 में भी आपके क्वेश्चन आया है मैच द डिजीज विद द अप्रोप्रिएट causative agent where you have to match the disease with the causative agent and they have asked you about treponemes. So it is an important topic from also the from the point of view कि अगर आपको गेट देना है सो गेट 2019 में ये पूछ चुके हैं सो इट कैन कम इन द मैच द कॉलम्स में आ सकता है फिल इन द ब्लैंक्स में आ सकता है आपको मल्टीपल चॉइस में आ सकता है इम्पॉर्टेंट टॉपिक है तो पहले ट्रिपोनिम कॉज क्या करते हैं ना ट्रिपोनिमा कॉज वेरियस लाइक इफ यू टॉक अबाउट इन टर्म्स ऑफ द डिजीजेस इट कॉजेस सिफिलीज यॉर्स पिंटा बीजुअल but the particular one which we are going to discuss today is syphilis, right? So when we are talking syphilis, it's a Treponema pallidum. So it's a class spirochetes और जब हम spirochete की बात करते हैं from Greek it means a coiled hair. So the particular spirochete responsible for syphilis is Treponema pallidum. When we talk about the structure and the biology, treponemes, we just talked, they are helically coiled, corkscrew shaped cells. So match the columns may even, they can ask you with the structure, the biology of treponemes. So their small size makes it invisible on light microscopy. So how you identify them? They are identified by its distinct undulating movements on dark field microscopy. Multiplication is by binary transverse fission and they have not yet been cultured in vitro. For research purposes, the CDC's Division of STD Prevention, sexual transmitted diseases, is making available a Treponema pallidum subspecies pallidum strain propagated in rabbits for research and development purposes. And getting such cultures, is highly regulated and you need approvals for, and they can do research in terms of, looking at different diagnostic tests in the United States. If we just look at the stats, like in India itself, India records 30 million episodes of STDs annually, of which the government treats about 10 million. And if we're talking about the syphilis, there is some study done, and what the doctors are mentioning is they are seeing a rise in, especially people who are testing positive for syphilis among the sexually transmitted diseases. The study has mentioned that, as one of the common STD in the pre-antibiotic era, the prevalence of syphilis was brought down from 8% of the population to less than 1%. In 2011, the National AIDS Control Organization had announced that country is on the verge of eliminating the bacterial infection. However, 6 years on, doctors say they are seeing a rise in those testing positive for syphilis among other sexual transmitted diseases, even as the prevalence of HIV is on the decline. So there are many factors, which has caused the increase in worldwide, and I would say worldwide here, with increased antibiotic resistance, absence of vaccines for and also increasing density and mobility of human population, and there are many more factors which has resulted in increase in these STDs. So just giving you an idea how ये topic इतना important क्यों है और ये questions क्यों आ सकते हैं. So why we really need to do research on these and why it is so important to understand their structure and biology. So let's talk about their flagella. So periplasmic flagella. So arrangement of spirochete flagella is unique. So the flagella are inserted subterminally at each end of the cell. wrap around the protoplasmic cylinder and usually overlap in the center region. So when we are talking about flagella, so spirochetes are highly motile and they propel themselves in a corkscrew manner by rotating around their longitudinal axis. ये बहुत important point है, इस पे question आ सकता है. So these organisms can swim easily through gel-like materials that almost hinder most other flagellated organisms. Consider treponemes as a highly invasive pathogens which often disseminate relatively soon after inoculation. So if we have to consider Treponema pallidum, it's a solely a human pathogen and it's a labile organism that cannot survive drying or exposure to disinfectants. So fomite transmission is virtually impossible. So transmission of Treponema pallidum, occurs via penetration of the spirochetes through mucosal membranes and abrasion on epithelial surfaces. So they are basically, if you look at the syphilis, it's transmissible by sexual contact with infectious lesions from mother to fetus in utero. It can be via blood product transfusion and also may happen through breaks in the skin that come in contact with infectious lesions. So some of the major risk factors, of syphilis are unprotected sex, intravenous drug use, and if you look at the healthcare workers, they are definitely at occupational risk. So usually the syphilis, it can be either acquired or congenital. So if you look at the acquired part, it is mainly, the transmission is mainly, or it is transmitted either by intimate contact with infectious lesions, which is the most common one, or it can also happen via blood transfusion, if the blood has been collected during early syphilis. And the second part, it could be congenital. That means, it being transmitted from an infected mother to her fetus. We talk about syphilis caused by Treponema pallidum, subspecies pallidum. And we have is a venereal syphilis, which is sexually transmitted, and congenital syphilis, which is an acquired in utero. Really happens if it is untreated. It progresses through different stages like primary, secondary, latent, and then tertiary. So treponemes, they are known to cause diverse clinical manifestations like, when we're talking about the primary stage, it is the initial genital tract lesion. And then it follows by the disseminated lesions, which comes under the secondary stage. And if what we have seen in the untreated individuals, there can be cardiovascular, neurological problems, which can becomes a part of a tertiary stage. And when we talk about is during pregnancy, if there is an infection, then we talk about is a congenital syphilis because that may result in the fetal death or birth defects. Names are, considered to be highly invasive pathogens, and at least, it's been considered because due to the unique structure of the treponemal outer membrane. We, talk about evasion of the host immune responses. They appear to be, at least it appears to be to these unique structure of their treponemal outer membrane. Becomes very important when we talk about the virulence factors because the outer sheet that encases the Treponema pallidum, they contain GAGs, glycosylaminoglycans, modified with sialic acid residues. These antigens resemble common molecules found on the surface of the human cells, and this helps Treponema pallidum evade the host immune response. And in this case, if you there are more relevant factors we can talk about, like for their ability to break down hyaluronic acid in host tissue, enhancing the ability of the pathogen to invade many organs and tissues. Take the overview of pathogenesis. Treponema pallidum initiates an inflammatory response at the site of infection and then invades to produce a systemic disease. I mean, it is not producing any toxins, but it is the ability of an organism to avoid host immune surveillance. And this allows the organism to multiply. In acquired syphilis, so Treponema pallidum is known to rapidly penetrate the intact mucous membrane within a few hours and enters the lymphatics and blood to produce a systemic infection. If you look at the rabbit model, there the spirochetes can be found in the lymphatic system as early as 30 minutes after primary inoculation. So it is suggests that syphilis is a systemic disease from the outset. And if you look at the incubation time from the exposure to the development of primary lesion, which occurs at the primary site of inoculation, it averages around 3 weeks, but it's known to range. There's a range given which is 10 to 90 days. Various studies suggest that both cellular and humoral processes contribute to host defenses against the treponemal infection. We already discussed that they have a unique, structure in terms of the outer membrane, and but what we have to understand is that this is what helps them in the evasion of the host immune responses. But at the same time, they do lack classical lipopolysaccharide, which endotoxin, but they possess abundant lipoproteins which induce the inflammatory processes. The diagnosis is done, it relies heavily on clinical manifestations. You're looking at the lesions and the serology, positive serology aids the diagnosis. You talk about the control part, of these, it basically based on the active surveillance, and specifically what requires is the treatment of contacts. What you have to discuss Treponema pallidum, subspecies pallidum. It considered as the most invasive of the pathogenic treponemes because it produces the highly destructive lesions in almost any tissue of the body, which includes the central nervous system. Increase antibiotic resistance, even the other common, when we're talking about the sexual transmitted ones, when you talk about chlamydia, gonorrhea, hepatitis B virus, herpes simplex virus type 2, HIV, human papilloma virus, your HPV, and trichomoniasis, along with syphilis. So with increased antibiotic resistance, now it is very important that there is a prompt treatment of new cases. There is a follow up on sources and contacts. There's a sexual hygiene, use of condoms. So public education is very important in this case, especially with the increased antibiotic resistance. As we say, the public education is important because we know that Treponema pallidum is solely a human pathogen and does not naturally occur in other species. And the kind of disease it causes, the syphilis, it's an infectious venereal disease. And the reservoir is, as a asymptomatic human carrier mostly, we can prevent disease, or at least we can also control the disease progression. So we have to educate people, let them know that how deadly this disease can be, and this is the most inexpensive, simple, and rapid, mostly the effective way. We finished this lecture by talking about syphilis, पॉजिटिव एजेंट एज अ बैक्टीरियम ट्रिपोनीमा पैलिडम, ये आपके गेट में भी क्वेश्चन आया था. Associated with significant complication if left untreated, and can facilitate the transmission and acquisition of HIV infection. ये आपके लिए additional statement है जिसे आप याद रखिएगा. And also, again, we have talked about it कि अगर this is untreated syphilis in pregnant women can lead to the infection of the fetus in up to 80% of the cases. And वो क्या कर सकता है? It may result in stillbirth or death of the infant in up to 40% of cases. 2019 गेट में ये क्वेश्चन आ चुका है एक बार, इस बाय द कॉजेटिव एजेंट, बट स्ट्रक्चर एंड बायोलॉजी पे ये क्वेश्चन दोबारा आपसे पूछा जा सकता है। माइक्रोबायोलॉजी की क्लासेस स्टार्ट हो रही हैं। अगर आपको ज्वाइन करना है तो आप व्हाट्सएप करिए इस नंबर पे। दिल्ली एंड फरीदाबाद में दोनों ही जगह क्लासेस रहेंगी। अगर आपको क्लास लेनी है तो इसमें पूरी माइक्रोबायोलॉजी हम डिस्कस करेंगे, पूरा सिलेबस कवर करेंगे, साथ में आपको खूब प्रैक्टिस देंगे मल्टीपल चॉइस क्वेश्चंस पे, फिल इन द ब्लैंक्स पे, मैच द कॉलम्स में, सो दैट यू are able to understand the concept and apply that concept in answering the questions.